So the ad for 800 Flowers actually appears what's called below the fold, meaning it's you have to scroll down to see the ad. So we were trying to work with Choice Hotels to see if we could move the ad up above the fold, because it did not do well below the fold. And again, this is the email from my boss, Kerry, concerning the law, the canned spam law. He says it's vague. Now, it's where it's ended up is that Choice Hotels has refused to move the ad. Their attorneys are saying that it's against the law. So we're stuck with it the way it is. It's not a very effective medium when the ad is, you have to scroll down to see the ad. I want to dwell on something else here from this particular campaign, which involves pixels, because the way the tracking works is these things called pixels are created and put on the ad. And the pixel actually transmits information back to the site that's doing the tracking. And if the ad is clicked, the pixel will see who's clicking it and their ID and transmit that information back. And so you actually have to place these pixels. You can see this is a sheet, an Excel sheet that tracks the 800 Flowers ad and the pixels on it. And I want you to notice the dimension is 1 by 1 pixel, so it's just a little tiny square that has data or tracking data embedded in it. It's tracking impressions in different ways. It's tracking clicks and other things. And this is DoubleClick is involved in the tracking, and that's one reason why it's the DoubleClick report that I referenced earlier, the DFP report. So you actually have to embed these things before the ads get put up. So we talked about certain important metrics and ways of tracking for digital campaigns. We talked about cost per click. We talked about cost per 1,000 impressions. We talked about cost per acquisition. We talked about different ways you could do a campaign as a search engine marketing or display. And with either one of those, whether you're using the self-serve platforms or working with the company and with an agency, you have to pick obviously what your goal is on the purchase funnel and what you're trying to get them to do, if it's to visit your website, etc. You can do geographic targeting. Obviously, you can do country targeting. Some things allow bids, many of them do. And of course, you have to set a budget. These are just a couple of general words of advice in terms of building e-commerce, that your ad should look like the landing pages they go to. The branding should look alike. Both of them should have the same objectives, the same value proposition. CTA is an important little phrase. That's the call to action. So people always say CTA in online advertising. We call it call to action. We just sort of say it, but they say CTA because they like acronyms like that. A couple of other issues just to touch on as we conclude our talk about online before we get into mobile. Ad serving is an important function that companies do. You may recall that Jason John from Publishers Clearinghouse, when he came to talk to us, did mention briefly that his Publishers Clearinghouse is also doing ad serving for other websites. So they're working with advertisers to send their ads and then track responses and etc. On the websites on which they place the ads. Another really important factor that's becoming bigger and bigger in the last 2 or 3 years or so is called programmatic buying. And this is basically automated buying of websites based on objectives. So it's sort of like the self-serve platform, the ad-serve platform on Facebook or Google, where you go in and you set parameters. Here's the demographic of the lifestyle I'm targeting, and here's how much I want to spend per impression or per click. This is what I'm bidding. And you press a button and you send it out there, and the different sites automatically will take the ad. You make the ad available. You're serving the ad also. It's all done by computers, by software interfaces and algorithms. I know that one problem we've had with Choice Hotels is occasionally an ad for another hotel will try to sneak onto our website or onto our Wi-Fi landing page. That's called rogue ads, and that has to be watched and monitored, obviously, because Choice Hotels isn't too happy when Marriott or somebody like that puts an ad on their site. So you've got to watch out for rogue ads coming in there. This shows from Statista the years 2013 and projecting to 2019, billions of dollars being placed by programmatic. So in other words, there isn't a human being who's calling up and placing the advertising. It's all done digitally. And by the way, this is something that other media types are looking at, trying to replicate, just as they've tried to replicate the tracking of results possible with interactive advertising. They're also trying to replicate programmatic buying. And here's programmatic video. You can see the growth. So we have covered a lot of territory here, I think, in this lecture. And again, we've kind of skimmed over. It's kind of a bird's eye view of some things, trying to make you aware of some issues. We have a whole course in the direct and interactive marketing department that is only about internet advertising. And I think any one of you is majoring in our division will have to take that course, and that will just get into it in a lot of detail. But hopefully we've touched on a few things. And these are some of the issues that really pop out. Of course, there's fraud. There's fraud in advertising too, because you can have there are certain programs that'll go and click an ad a bunch of times and try to falsely show that the ad has been successful. So there's all kinds of things like that that you have to watch out for. Of course, hacking is an issue. Hacking of data control, privacy, again, encryption is another issue. And we talked about some of the things that Facebook is facing, so to speak. Google, in terms of who owns the data and privacy, and the fact that people can get on and there's no editing process to screen bad content. This is a little piece on European versus U.S. privacy policy, because as I've mentioned before, Europe is much stricter than we are. So here's the link. I encourage you guys, as you read it, to take a quick look at this article. Basically what it says is that in Europe you own your own data. Okay, there's a right to be forgotten decision. You can ask Google, etc., to remove links to news articles that were negative to you. Your bank has been hacked. Any company must notify national regulators within 3 days of discovering a breach. And in the U.S., they don't do that. They take their time. What information do these companies have on you? Now, in Europe, you can ask any company to send you details about what data they have on you and what the information is used for. Within a month, they give it. Can't get it in the U.S. Okay. So some of the differences. Basically, you have much more rights in terms of your own data in Europe than you do here in the U.S. because we are, after all, a society that is, let's face it, very dominated by business and business interests. And that is just the way it is. Let's go back to where we were here, shall we? Okay. Couple of other issues. This is from Statista. This is concerns that media planners have with online advertising as of August 2016. And share of respondents that mentioned this as a concern. So you've got transparency, viewability. Viewability means if you're below the fold or whatever, the impression is still counted and you're paying for it if you're paying on an impression basis, but your ad hasn't even been seen, almost like a magazine. Anyone who subscribes to the magazine, you're automatically thinking that your ad got seen, right? But it could be buried somewhere in the magazine. There's fraud, some of these click fraud companies, etc. Data privacy, and of course ad blocking coming up. So this is how some of the media planners see issues on online advertising. Here's an ad, a little piece on ad blocking. Again, you'll see my favorite source, the New York Times. I think arguably the world's best newspaper. Of course, it's not quite as good as The Onion, which is the world's favorite news source, but it tries. So this talks about ad blocking software. This is 2017, right? And it's blocking ads. And most sites that are free are ad supported, right? So ad blocking software is a problem, and it's cropping up in mobile now too, which hadn't been the case up till a few years ago. Okay. So you guys are probably aware, probably a number of you have ad blocking software. Okay. And there'll be more and more of it. It is definitely an issue. And here's ad blockers being used on mobile phones by age group. Internet advertising strengths and weaknesses. Well, rather than listing everything up here, I'd like you guys to spend a minute and think about it, maybe even write them down. Strengths and I guess measurability is one thing I'll put out there. Wide reach is another one. Weaknesses, well, we saw some of those, but what would you say? So we've covered history and background, starting with 1994 with Wired Magazine, up to the present with Facebook and Google kind of dominating things. We talked about types of advertising. We talked about display ads, which are banners. We talked about rich media ads, which have movement. We talked about search marketing, paid search, and organic search. We talked about email marketing, sponsorships, native advertising, the main kinds of marketing on the internet. Well, you know what? We didn't really talk a heck of a lot about creating ads, but I did show you some actual things that I've been involved with Choice Hotels, with Hulu, and talked about some of the flaws in the ad that they ran with 800 Flowers. We talked about trends, and we talked about strengths and weaknesses. And so next we will be talking about mobile marketing, but that's going to be in another section. That'll be level 6.